Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Hughes Harmony, watching the stars through the main window. His hands shook slightly as he held his coffee cup. Today was the day humanity would meet aliens for the first time. After months of radio, signals back and forth, they were finally going to see what these beings looked like. "Captain, we're getting close to the meeting point," said Lieutenant Bobby Chun from his station. The young officer had been nervous all week. Everyone on the ship felt the same way. Jake nodded and walked to the center of the bridge. "All stations, prepare for first contact. This is what we've been training for." The diplomatic vessel Harmony was Earth's best ship. It carried no weapons, only peace offerings and gifts from every nation on Earth. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez had spent years preparing for this moment. She sat in the diplomatic section, reading her notes one more time. "Captain, I'm picking up something on sensors," called out Dr. Alex Carter from the science station. The tall man with gray hair had studied alien life for 20 years, even though no one believed it existed until now. "It's big, really big." On the main screen, a massive structure appeared. It looked like a crystal palace floating in space, beautiful and glowing with soft blue light. The alien station was 10 times bigger than any human building. "My God," whispered Navigator Julie Adams. "It's amazing." Jake felt his heart race. "Open a channel. Let's say hello." The screen flickered and suddenly showed an alien face. The creature was tall and thin, with smooth gray skin that seemed to glow. Its eyes were large and kind, like a wise old teacher. When it spoke, its voice was gentle and musical. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective. We have waited long to meet you." Ambassador Rodriguez stepped forward. She was a small woman with short black hair, but her voice was strong. "Greetings, Veltar. I am Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez, speaking for all of Earth. We come in peace and friendship." The alien's face showed what looked like a smile. "Peace. Yes, we know this concept well. We have moved beyond the need for violence. Our collective has brought harmony to hundreds of worlds." Dr. Carter made notes on his tablet. Something about the alien's words bothered him, but he couldn't say what. "We invite you to our station," Veltar continued. "Come and learn about the peace we can offer your species." An hour later, Jake and his team moved through the alien station. The walls were smooth and white, glowing with soft light. Everything was clean and perfect. Too perfect, Jake thought. Ambassador Rodriguez walked beside Veltar, asking questions about the Zephyrian way of life. "How do you maintain peace across so many worlds?" "We share one mind," Veltar explained. "Individual thoughts create conflict. When all beings think as one, there is no war, no anger, no fear." "But what about creativity? Art? Music?" asked Dr. Susan Walsh, the team's cultural expert. "Such things are distractions from true harmony," Veltar replied. "We have moved beyond such primitive needs." Dr. Carter stayed quiet, but his instruments picked up strange readings. The Zephyrians showed no individual brain patterns. It was like they were all controlled by one giant mind. They entered a great hall where hundreds of other aliens waited. All looked similar to Veltar, but Jake noticed something strange. Their eyes were empty. They moved like robots, not living beings. "These are our collective members," Veltar said with pride. "No conflict, no pain, no individual suffering. Perfect peace." Lisa Rodriguez felt a chill run down her back. What happened to their individual personalities? "They were improved," Veltar replied, "just as we can improve humanity." Back on Earth, President Helen Brooks sat in the Oval Office, watching the live feed from the alien station. Her advisors filled the room, all talking at once. "This is the chance of a lifetime," said Secretary of State Paul Martin. Think of the technology they could share with us. I don't like it, said General Mike Thompson, a tough man with gray hair and cold eyes. Something feels wrong about this whole thing. You're just paranoid, Martin shot back. These beings have moved beyond war. They're offering us the same gift. Commander Kate Williams, head of military intelligence, studied the video feed. She had spent her life learning to spot lies and hidden threats. Every instinct told her the Zephyrians were dangerous. Ma'am, she said to the president, I think we should be very careful here. We don't know what this collective really means. President Brooks nodded slowly. She had to make a decision that would affect all of humanity. Keep watching. I want to know everything about these aliens before we agree to anything. On the alien station, Dr. Carter made an excuse to slip away from the group. He needed to run some private scans. What he found made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians weren't just linked mentally. They were being controlled by something else. Their brain patterns showed signs of severe damage, as if their individual minds had been burned out and replaced with something artificial. He tried to contact the Harmony, but his communication device wouldn't work. The aliens were blocking all signals. Dr. Carter, came Veltar's voice from behind him. You seem troubled. Alex turned around, trying to look calm. Just fascinated by your technology. It's incredible. Yes, it is, Veltar agreed. Soon your people will experience it themselves. We have already begun preparations. What kind of preparations? Veltar's empty eyes seemed to look right through him. Every species must be studied before joining the collective. We have been watching Earth for many years. We know your weaknesses, your fears, your military capabilities. Dr. Carter felt his heart stop. You've been spying on us? Learning, Veltar corrected. We must understand each species before we can help them achieve peace. Your people are interesting, so violent, so chaotic. It will take much work to fix you. The scientists realized they were in terrible danger. The Zephyrians weren't offering friendship. They were planning to take over Earth Dot back in the main hall. Ambassador Rodriguez was signing preliminary agreements. The documents promised peace, technology sharing, and protection from hostile aliens. In return, Earth would allow Zephyrian advisors to help guide humanity toward a better future. This is wonderful, Lisa said, not noticing the cold look in Veltar's eyes. Our peoples will benefit so much from this partnership. Indeed, Veltar replied. Your species will be perfected. Captain Morrison watched the ceremony with growing unease. His military training told him something was very wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what Dr. Carter finally made it back to the group. But it was too late. The agreements were signed. Earth had just invited the wolves into the chicken coop. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Veltar made one final statement. We look forward to beginning the integration process. Your people will learn too. Love collective peace as much as we do. The words sent ice through Jake's veins. Integration, not cooperation, not friendship. Integration. On the trip back to Earth, Dr. Carter pulled Captain Morrison aside. Jake, we need to talk. These aliens aren't what they seem. What do you mean? They're not peaceful. They're conquerors. They've destroyed the minds of every species they've helped. We just signed Earth's death warrant. Jake stared out at the stars, realizing humanity had just made the biggest mistake in its history. The Zephyrians had played them perfectly, appearing as peaceful teachers, while planning to turn every human into a mindless drone. The worst part was that Earth's leaders were so hungry for peace and advanced technology that they would ignore any warning signs. By the time they realized the truth, it might be too late. As the Harmony headed home, carrying news of humanity's new friends, Dr. Carter began planning. If the governments wouldn't listen to his warnings, he would have to find people who would. The war for Earth's survival was about to begin, and most humans didn't even know they were already losing. 6 months passed since the signing of the peace treaty with the Zephyrians. The world had changed, but not in the way most people expected. In major cities around Earth, tall white towers now stood next to human buildings. The aliens called them Harmony Centers. Dr. Nancy Foster walked through the streets of New York, watching people with growing alarm. Citizens moved slowly, their faces blank and peaceful. They smiled, but their eyes were empty. Just like the aliens on the space station Nancy worked as a brain doctor at Mount Sinai Hospital. She had been studying the effects of the Zephyrian neural harmony devices that people were encouraged to wear. The government said these small metal discs would help reduce stress and create peace of mind. What Nancy found was much worse. The devices are changing people's brains, she told her colleague, Dr. Peter Kim, as they reviewed brain scans. Look at these patterns. The creativity centers are almost completely shut down. The areas that control independent thinking are being suppressed. Peter looked worried. Are you sure? The government says these devices are safe. I'm certain. Nancy replied. The people wearing these things are losing their ability to think for themselves. They're becoming like robots. Meanwhile, across the country, Colonel Steve Parker was dealing with his own problems. Several military bases had gone completely silent after agreeing to install Zephyrian peace systems. His job was to find out what happened to them. Steve drove his jeep through the gates of Fort Davidson, a base that had stopped responding to communications 3 weeks ago. What he found made his blood run cold. The soldiers were still there, but they weren't really soldiers anymore. They moved, like sleepwalkers, following simple routines without thinking. When Steve spoke to them, they answered with empty voices. Soldier, what's your name? He asked a young private. This unit serves the collective, the private replied, his eyes staring at nothing. What's your name? Steve asked again. Names are not important. Only service to the collective matters. Steve's team searched the base and found the source of the problem. In the command center, a large Zephyrian device hummed quietly. It looked like a crystal sphere surrounded by metal rings. The device was sending out some kind of signal that had turned the entire base into mindless drones. Sir, we need to get out of here, said Sergeant Mary Lopez. This place gives me the creeps. Steve agreed, but as they tried to leave the base, soldiers surrounded them. The humans moved together like a swarm of insects, all thinking the same thoughts. You will join the collective, they said in unison. Peace is better than conflict. Steve's team barely escaped, fighting their way through soldiers who used to be their friends. The colonel realized that the Zephyrians weren't just offering peace. They were taking over human minds. On the frontier world of New Texas, Lieutenant Commander Amy Blake was seeing the same patterns. The planet had been one of the first to accept Zephyrian guidance, and now it was becoming a nightmare. Amy commanded the small military outpost that protected the colony. She watched through binoculars as Zephyrian peacekeepers moved through the settlements. These aliens looked different from Veltar. They were bigger, stronger, and carried strange weapons. They're not here to keep peace, Amy told her second-in-command, Captain Roy Wilson. They're cataloging everything. Our weapons, our defenses, our people. Roy nodded grimly. I've been tracking their movements. They're mapping every inch of our territory. It's like they're preparing for something. The Zephyrians had told the colonists that they needed to understand human society to help them better. But Amy could see the truth. They were studying humanity. Like scientists studying lab rats. When Amy tried to protest the Zephyrian commander, a tall gray being called Corvon demonstrated why resistance was useless. Without warning, every piece of technology in the outpost simply stopped working. Weapons, communications, even the lights went dark. Your primitive technology is no match for our capabilities, Corvin said in his musical voice. We suggest you cooperate. Amy's 30 soldiers were helpless. Their modern weapons were just pieces of metal and plastic without power. The Zephyrians had shut down everything electronic with a simple thought. What do you want? Amy asked. Compliance. Corvin replied. Your people will be much happier once they join the collective. No more anger, no more fear, no more individual suffering, and no more freedom, Amy shot back. Freedom is an illusion that causes pain, the alien explained. We will free your species from the burden of individual thought. Back on Earth, Doctor. Alex Carter was working in secret. After returning from the alien station, he had tried to warn the government about the Zephyrian threat. Nobody would listen. They were too excited about the advanced technology and promises of peace. So Alex decided to work alone. He had been intercepting alien communications, trying to understand their real plans. What he discovered was worse than his worst fears. The Zephyrians called it processing. They would take over a species slowly, using their technology to destroy individual minds while keeping the bodies alive. The processed beings would then serve as biological robots, doing whatever the collective needed. Alex's computer finished decoding another message. This one made him sick to his stomach. The Zephyrians were discussing human breeding programs to maintain a supply of fresh minds for processing. A plan to keep some humans as livestock, producing new generations to feed their collective. Consciousness. My God, Alex whispered. They're not conquerors, they're farmers. And we're the crop. He immediately tried to contact military leaders, but found that many had already been compromised. The neural harmony devices weren't just being used on civilians. Government officials and military officers were wearing them too, thinking they were just stress relief tools. Alex realized he needed to find people who hadn't been exposed to the alien technology. He started reaching out to individuals in remote areas, people who might still be able to think clearly. President Helen Brooks sat in a meeting with her advisors. Half of them wore the small neural harmony devices, their faces peaceful and blank. The other half looked worried. The integration is proceeding smoothly, reported Secretary Martin, his voice strangely calm. Crime rates are down 90% in cities with harmony centers. People are happier. They're not happier, Commander Kate Williams argued. They're drugged. Those devices are destroying their ability to think independently. Independent thinking causes conflict, Martin replied, sounding like he was repeating a lesson. The collective brings peace. President Brooks looked at her Secretary of State with alarm. Paul Martin had been her friend for 20 years. Now he sounded like a robot. Paul, are you feeling all right? She asked. I feel perfect, he replied, with an empty smile. You should try a neural harmony device, Helen. It would help you understand the beauty of collective thought. Kate Williams caught the president's eye and nodded toward the door. They needed to talk privately. In the hallway, Kate whispered urgently. Ma'am, we're losing people fast. The devices are spreading through the government like a plague. We need to act now. What can we do? Helen asked. The Zephyrians have shown they can shut down our technology whenever they want. General Thompson has been preparing for this, Kate replied. He never trusted the aliens. He's been working on contingency plans. As they spoke, Dr. Carter's warnings were finally reaching the right people. Colonel Parker had made contact with other military units that hadn't been compromised. Dr. Foster was sharing her research with scientists who still had their minds intact. Slowly, a resistance network was forming. People who could still think for themselves were starting to realize the horrible truth. The Zephyrians hadn't come to bring peace. They had come to harvest humanity's consciousness and turn Earth into a farm for minds. The aliens had made one crucial mistake, though. They assumed that humans would accept their fate quietly once they understood the power of the collective. They didn't realize that some humans would rather die fighting than live as slaves in hidden bases around the world. Free humans began preparing for a war unlike any in history. They couldn't use modern weapons because the aliens could shut them down. They couldn't use radio communications because the aliens were listening. But humans had fought wars before electricity existed. They had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. The Zephyrians were about to learn that peaceful humans were still humans, and humans were the most dangerous predators their planet had ever produced. Velvet Glove was coming off, and underneath was an iron fist that the collective had never seen before. The real war was about to begin. The day everything changed started like any other. President Helen Brooks was having breakfast when her phone rang. It was Veltar, the Zephyrian leader. "Good morning, President Brooks," the alien said in his musical voice. "We need to discuss the final phase of integration." Helen felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean, final phase?" "Your military forces must be disbanded," Veltar explained calmly. "Violence has no place in a peaceful society. All weapons must be surrendered to our peacekeepers." "That's impossible," Helen replied. "We can't just give up our defenses." "You misunderstand," Veltar said, his tone still gentle but somehow threatening. "This is not a request. This is a requirement for your species to join the collective." Helen looked at her advisors. Half of them nodded agreement, their faces blank from the neural harmony devices. The other half looked terrified. "And if we refuse?" Helen asked. "Then you will learn why peace is better than conflict," Veltar replied. The call ended, and within seconds, every piece of technology in Washington, D.C. stopped working. Cars died in the streets. Power grids failed. Cell phones went silent. The city was thrown back into the dark ages in the blink of an eye. But Washington wasn't alone. Across the globe, every major city experienced the same blackout. The Zephyrians had demonstrated their power by shutting down human civilization with a single command. "This is their ultimatum," Commander Kate Williams said as she and the president sat in the now dark Oval Office. "Submit or face extinction." The blackout lasted exactly 72 hours. When the power came back on, a message was broadcast on every screen and radio on Earth. Veltar's face appeared, serene and confident. "People of Earth," he said, "you have seen what happens when you resist the collective. We do not wish to harm you, but we cannot allow violence to exist in our peaceful galaxy. You have 48 hours to surrender all military forces. After that, we will be forced to take more direct action." In hidden bunkers around the world, people who had escaped the neural harmony devices were planning humanity's response. General Mike Thompson sat in an underground command center that had been built during the Cold War. The facility was completely analog, using technology from the 1950s that the aliens couldn't shut down. "They think they know us," Thompson said. To his staff, "They've been watching us for years, studying our weapons and tactics. But they don't understand what we really are." Colonel Steve Parker had made it to the bunker after escaping from Fort Davidson. "Sir, they can shut down anything electronic. How do we fight beings who can disable our weapons with a thought?" "We fight like our ancestors did," Thompson replied, "with fire and steel and fury. The same way humans have always fought when their backs are against the wall." Dr. Alex Carter had also reached the bunker, bringing with him everything he'd learned about the Zephyrians. "I've been studying their communications," he said. "They're not just planning to conquer us. They're planning to turn us into biological robots while keeping a breeding population to produce new minds for their collective." "Breeding population?" asked Colonel Parker. "They need fresh consciousness to feed on," Alex explained. "Well, Keep maybe 1% of humanity alive to produce children. The rest will be processed into drones. The room fell silent as the horror of the situation sank in. This wasn't just conquest. It was the complete destruction of human civilization. They made one mistake, Thompson said quietly. They assumed we'd surrender when we saw their power. They don't understand that humans would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Dr. Nancy Foster had been working non-stop to understand the alien technology. "I've figured out how their mind control works," she announced to the group. "The neural harmony devices don't just suppress individual thought. They make people physically unable to resist the collective's commands. Can we reverse it?" asked Kate Williams. "Not yet," Nancy replied. "But I've found something interesting. The devices work by suppressing the parts of the brain that handle stress and fear. Without those emotions, people can't fight back." "So fear is actually protecting us?" Steve asked. "Exactly," Nancy said. "The aliens don't understand that fear and anger aren't just negative emotions. They're survival instincts. They're what kept humanity alive for millions of years." Meanwhile, on the frontier world of New Texas, Lieutenant Commander Amy Blake was proving that human survival instincts were still strong. When the Zephyrians had shut down all electronic weapons, she had done something they didn't expect. She had her soldiers dig up the old kinetic weapons that the colony kept for emergencies. Crossbows, compound bows, and even some Civil War-era rifles that used black powder instead of modern ammunition. "These weapons are over 100 years old," Captain Roy Wilson said as he loaded a crossbow. "The aliens won't even see them as threats. That's exactly why they'll work," Amy replied. "They've been studying our modern military. They know how to counter lasers and plasma weapons. But they probably don't even know what a crossbow is. When the Zephyrian peacekeepers came to arrest the human soldiers, they got a surprise. The aliens were used to simply disabling human weapons and watching their enemies surrender. They weren't prepared for arrows and crossbow bolts. The attack caught them completely off guard. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Zephyrians were actually hurt by humans. Their personal shields could stop energy weapons, but they couldn't stop a sharpened piece of metal moving at high speed. "Impossible," Corvan, the Zephyrian commander, said as he watched his peacekeepers fall. "How are you harming us with such primitive weapons?" "Because primitive works," Amy replied, loading another bolt. "You forgot that humans survived for thousands of years before we invented computers." The small victory on New Texas was reported to the resistance network on Earth. For the first time since the crisis began, humans had actually won a fight against the aliens. General Thompson smiled when he heard the news. "They've been studying our modern weapons, but they don't understand our history. They think because we use advanced technology, we've forgotten how to fight without it." Dr. Alex Carter was working on another discovery. He had intercepted more alien communications and found something crucial. "The Zephyrians aren't just one species," he announced. "They're a collection of conquered races. Every alien we've seen is actually a processed being from a different world." "You mean they were once free like us?" asked Kate Williams. "Yes," Alex replied. "But they had their minds destroyed and replaced with the collective consciousness. They're not evil, they're victims." This discovery changed everything. The beings threatening Earth weren't natural enemies. They were the enslaved remains of dozens of civilizations that had fallen to the collective. "That's why they don't understand us," Thompson realized. "Every species they've conquered before must have been peaceful. They probably surrendered when they saw the collective's power. But humans aren't peaceful," Steve Parker added. "We just choose to be peaceful when we can. When we can't, we become something else entirely." As the 48-hour deadline approached, the resistance prepared for war. They had weapons the aliens couldn't disable. tactics the collective couldn't predict, and something the processed beings had lost long ago, the willingness to die for freedom. The Zephyrians had made a fatal error. They had studied humanities, technology and military strategies, but they hadn't studied human nature. They didn't understand that a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars wouldn't go quietly into slavery. They were about to learn that when you back humans into a corner, when you threaten everything they hold dear, when you try to take away their freedom and their minds, you don't get surrender, you get war. The collective had harvested the consciousness of hundreds of peaceful species, but they had never met a species that had evolved from predators. They had never encountered beings that could choose to be monsters when they needed to be. The 48 hours were almost up, and Earth's answer was ready. It wouldn't be surrender. It would be a declaration of war against beings who had forgotten what war really meant. The sleeping giant was about to wake up, and the galaxy would never be the same. The deadline passed without a word from Earth's governments. Veltar stood in the command center of his mothership, watching the planet below with growing confusion. Every other species had surrendered by now. The show of power was always enough to break their will to resist. Begin the final integration, he commanded his subordinates. If they will not choose peace, we will give it to them. Across Earth, Zephyrian forces began their assault. They expected quick victory against a species that could no longer use modern weapons. What they found instead was something they had never encountered before. In the mountains of Colorado, Colonel Steve Parker led a guerrilla attack against a Zephyrian outpost. His soldiers moved like ghosts through the forest, using hunting skills that humans had developed over thousands of years. They carried weapons that looked like toys compared to alien technology, but they were deadly in their right hands. Remember, Steve whispered to his team, they can't shut down what was never turned on. These crossbows and rifles worked fine before electricity was invented. The attack came at dawn. Zephyrian sentries, used to detecting electronic signatures, never saw the humans coming. Arrows and bolts flew from the trees, striking down peacekeepers who had thought themselves invincible. Alert the collective, one wounded alien gasped. Humans are using primitive weapons, but there was no time to alert anyone. Steve's team moved with the speed and precision of wolves hunting prey. They struck hard and fast, then disappeared, back into the forest before reinforcements could arrive. The same pattern was repeated around the world. In the jungles of South America, humans used blowguns and poison darts. In the deserts of Africa, they fought with spears and traditional weapons that had been used for centuries. In the cities, they built bombs from fertilizer and household chemicals. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't understand. Every time they adapted to one tactic, humans switched to something completely different. It was chaos, and chaos was something the collective mind couldn't process. Dr. Rachel Price had been working in secret military labs, developing new weapons based on Dr. Carter's research. She had discovered that the Zephyrians' greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They share one consciousness, she explained to General Thompson. That means they all think alike. They can't adapt to random, unpredictable behavior because their minds are all connected. What are you suggesting? Thompson asked. We fight dirty, Rachel replied. We use tactics that don't make sense. We be chaotic, random, unpredictable. Everything they're not. Rachel's team had built weapons that exploited the aliens' biology. Instead of trying to kill them, these weapons attacked their connection to the collective. They caused individual consciousness to emerge in beings that had been part of the group mind for centuries. The first test came when a group of Zephyrian soldiers attacked a human settlement. Instead of fighting back with conventional weapons, the humans used Rachel's consciousness bombs. The devices sent out a signal that forced the aliens to think as individuals for the first time in their lives. The results were devastating. The Zephyrian soldiers stopped moving, their faces twisted in confusion and terror. They began to remember who they had been before joining the collective. They remembered their home worlds, their families, their individual lives. What ... What have we done? One alien whispered, looking at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. We destroyed entire civilizations. The psychological shock was too much for beings who had lived as a group mind for centuries. Most of them simply collapsed, their minds unable to handle individual consciousness after so long without it. Commander Kate Williams was leading her own operation, using human psychology against the invaders. She had discovered that the Zephyrians were completely unprepared for emotional warfare. They don't understand anger, she explained to her team. They don't understand hatred or fear or desperation. They've never had to deal with enemies who want to hurt them personally. Kate's people began broadcasting messages to Zephyrian forces, not in the calm, logical way diplomats would speak, but with raw human emotion. They described what the aliens had done to their families, their friends, their world. The psychological attack worked better than any weapon. The collective mind, used to peaceful absorption of other species, couldn't process the sheer fury that humans could generate. It created feedback loops in their consciousness that disrupted their ability to function. On New Texas, Lieutenant Commander Amy Blake had turned her small outpost into a fortress. The Zephyrians had sent a massive force to crush the human resistance. But Amy had learned something important about alien psychology. They expect us to fight like them, she told her soldiers. Organized, logical, following rules. But humans don't fight fair when we're desperate. Amy's defenders used every dirty trick humans had ever invented. They poisoned water supplies, set traps, used the aliens' own technology against them. They fought like cornered animals, because that's exactly what they were. The Zephyrians had never encountered anything like it. Their processed minds, used to following orders and maintaining order, couldn't adapt to the chaos of human warfare. They tried to use their superior technology, but humans kept finding ways around it. Sir, Captain Roy Wilson reported, the aliens are retreating. They can't handle our tactics. Of course they can't, Amy replied. They've been fighting civilized species for so long, they forgot what war really looks like. Back on Earth, Doctor. Alex Carter had made the most important discovery of all. Hidden in the deepest layers of Zephyrian communications, he found something that changed everything. The collective is afraid, he announced to the resistance leadership. For the first time in their history, they're actually afraid. Afraid. Of what? Asked General Thompson. Of us, Alex replied. They've never met a species that could hurt them. Every other civilization they conquered was peaceful. They would rather die than fight back. But humans ... Humans are different, Thompson finished. Exactly. We choose to be peaceful, but we never forgot how to be violent. And when our survival is threatened, we become something that terrifies them. The evidence was in the alien communications. The collective was calling Earth the Chaos World, and humans the unpredictable species. They were starting to question whether conquering humanity was worth the cost. Dr. Nancy Foster had been working on the ultimate weapon against the collective consciousness. She had found a way to reverse the effects of the neural harmony devices and restore individual thought to processed beings. If we can break their group mind, she explained, the whole collective will collapse. Billions of enslaved beings will remember who they used to be. Can you do it? Asked Kate Williams. I think so, Nancy replied. But we need to get close to their mothership. The signal has to be broadcast from the source of their collective consciousness. Captain Jake Morrison had been planning for exactly this moment. His ship, the Harmony, had been rebuilt in secret using pre-electronic technology. It looked like a sane diplomatic vessel, but inside it was a weapon designed to carry Nancy's consciousness virus to the heart of the alien fleet. "This is a suicide mission," Jake told his volunteer crew. "We'll be flying into the middle of their fleet with weapons that barely work." "And we better make it count," replied Lieutenant Bobby Chun. The young officer had lost his family when the aliens destroyed Chicago. He had nothing left to lose. As Jake's ship approached the massive Zephyrian mothership, the collective tried to understand what was happening. They detected the primitive human vessel, but couldn't comprehend why it was attacking them. "They're using chemical propulsion," reported one confused alien, "and mechanical computers. How is this possible?" "Humans are more primitive than we thought," Veltar replied. "Destroy them." But the mothership's weapons were designed to fight modern spacecraft. They couldn't target something as simple as Jake's rebuilt ship. It was like trying to swat a fly with a sledgehammer. The Harmony penetrated the alien defenses and reached the mothership's core. Nancy Foster activated her consciousness virus, sending it directly into the collective's central mind. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the galaxy, billions of processed beings suddenly remembered who they were. The group mind that had controlled them for centuries shattered like glass. On Earth, the Zephyrian forces stopped fighting. They stood in confusion, their individual minds returning after lifetimes of collective consciousness. Some collapsed from the shock. Others began to weep as they remembered their original worlds and families. "What have we become?" cried one alien soldier, staring at his weapons in horror. "We destroyed our own people." The psychological impact spread through the Zephyrian fleet like a plague. Beings who had been part of the collective for thousands of years suddenly had to deal with individual thoughts and emotions. Many couldn't handle it. Veltar himself stood frozen on his command bridge, his mind reeling as memories flooded back. He remembered being a peaceful scholar on a distant world before the collective came. He remembered watching his people being processed one by one until only he remained. I was like them," he whispered, looking at the human planet below. "I was free once." But the damage was spreading beyond just psychological trauma. The consciousness virus was designed to